Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the personal and emotional elements of money and the impact that money has on every area of your life. I'm Austin Black, a personal finance coach that helps couples overcome their fear and frustration of financial management so they can take complete control of their money. What started as a desire to learn the fundamentals of money management has turned into a passion for helping couples work together to achieve financial success and strengthen their relationship with each other. Whether you're looking for the best strategies to manage your money as a couple, or you're tired of struggling to gain traction and want to overcome the fear and frustration associated with finances, I'm here to help, and this show is for you. Ready to learn more? Then let's talk about the heart of money. Well, most people think that in order to become debt-free, have financial security, get anywhere in life with your money, you have to either make a lot of it or spend very little of it. And the reality is that neither one of those are completely true. In fact, I've got a training I'm going to walk you through called the Financial Freedom Blueprint that's going to show you how to become debt-free and have financial security without the need for a huge income or restrictive lifestyle. I'm offering this training live once a month. So head on over to freedommoneycoach.com/training and you can get signed up for free. In this training, I'm going to walk you through the exact strategies that I teach my clients on how to get on the same page with their spouse, create a plan for their money, and accomplish their financial goals through behavior management. It's going to be so much fun. You're going to learn a ton. You're going to walk away inspired, motivated, and encouraged to achieve your financial goals this year. So head on over to freedommoneycoach.com/training. Hey folks, welcome back to the Heart of Money, episode 88. I'm your host, Austin Black, joined by the masterful, good-looking, I'm running out of comments to make you feel good, Mr. Bob Wessler. How are you this evening, sir?
That was a short list. That's amazing. I can't believe you went that long, but thank you. Thank you.
Occasionally, I have some really, great things to say about you. Other times, I am just out of anything to say about you. So it's kind of it's one or the other usually.
Yeah.
I'm sure you feel the same way about me. You just don't say it.
Yeah, the filter doesn't work very often.
Yeah.
So
just goes right on through or stops altogether.
Yeah, or just shorts out. Exactly.
Well, Bob, it was a lot of fun doing our episode on savings here a few weeks ago. So much so that we went back to the drawing table and said, how much more can we talk about savings? Because we had so many great ideas come out of that conversation. And we've kind of put together, or I guess I put together, and you said that sounds good, a list of additional topics and angles, because the more you look at savings, the more there's always something there. There's always a different element of it. And I think, in true to the form of this show, we go on a deep dive and we bring all angles, all perspectives. We probably belabor some topics more than necessary. No, we never do that. We always just get to the point and go straight forward with it. It's never any question of what we're talking about.
Right.
So yeah, this is going to be our second episode in this series on savings, and kind of starting back, I guess, at the basics. Maybe, we took a high level look last time at, why you'd even save in the first place. And that brought up some commentary around how do you start saving, right? If you are in that position where you just have to save for the sake of saving, or if you are a spender, which we didn't really talk about, how can you start saving? So I think there's a couple different angles that we can take this conversation. But what was some of your thoughts and reflections after our last conversation, Bob?
I think we had a lot to talk about in a little bit of time, and we had a topic and we took as many rabbit trails. Okay, maybe I just took all the rabbit trails in different forms and functions, trying to get as much as we can in from different angles, which is kind of ironic that we weren't even talking about the spenders. We were focused on one half of a couple in most cases.
Yeah.
And just hit the savings, and there was so much to talk about that it's like, oh, we've got to talk more. There's no way we can just stop with this. We really need to get into it rather than just staying high level, because we can't stay high level very well. We can, but we go deep pretty quick. And,
Right.
if we don't come back and cover some of that stuff, I think we miss out and get to banter on some of that, as well as sharing some insight to others that can agree or disagree with us.
100%. And that's, for me, that's the fun part of being a coach, is whether it's, on this show with you, in my free discovery calls, in my one-on-one sessions with clients, deep diving is where we get the most impact. That's why I call one of our first coaching calls a deep dive call, because you can talk about surface level till the cows come home, and that never really makes a difference. We get some ideas, we get some thoughts, we get some perspectives, but until you start doing a deep dive, you don't learn, you don't transform, you don't change, you don't accomplish new things. So yeah, true to form, we're going to take a deep dive and look at several different areas and phases of savings, because savings isn't all that financial management is about, like we talked about last time, but it is a very, very important key component to your overall financial journey. So that's why we're gonna spend a few more weeks talking about this, and hopefully at the end of this series, both spenders and savers are more equipped to enter in a healthy savings strategy. That's my goal anyway.
Healthy savings, because we really started off with that last week about the point of saving and to what extent you do it. So
Yep.
We're getting more into the healthy aspects of it, and I think you picked some good topics for us to dive into. So
Well, let's get to her. So, like I said, starting kind of back at the beginning, we alluded in our last conversation around the fact that to save for the sake of saving is pointless. It's the equivalent of hoarding. It actually gives a negative mindset and framework around the very prudent process of managing money. But at the same time, if you're in a spot where you don't have anything saved, you do need to save for the sake of saving. But there's some people that don't know how to do that. Maybe they are a spender. Maybe they have never had the ability to save, even if they aren't a spender. They've struggled with developing that habit, with being comfortable with it, with having the money to do it. So many different elements. So tonight, we're going to talk about how to get started with a savings habit, whether you are a natural saver or not, because it is a very important piece, like I said, of the overall management process. And Bob, I have personally, I have never been a extreme saver by any means. I have always tried to save, and I've always seen the value in saving, whether it's for emergencies, whether it's for purchases, whether it's for long-term goals. But I remember early on, back whenever I was in college, had an hourly job, and obviously single income, wasn't old enough to have a family yet. Savings was hard whenever there wasn't a lot of money to put back aside, and even once I got to become an adult, more expenses, more responsibilities, and it still is not an easy endeavor. To this day, I have to make a conscious effort to save money. Now, granted, with more income, with more behavior management practices, with more control and accountability, it becomes easier. But I don't think I could personally say that savings is ever an easy task. How do you feel it for you?
yeah, savings is never easy because spending is easier.
Right.
I mean, that's the society, the culture that we live in, that if you've got it, it's a whole lot easier to spend it than it is to keep it in your pocket. One of the things you said early on about saving, and maybe we touch on this a little bit. I think we talked about it before, but in essence, it's always good to save. Don't save to your detriment, but don't go spend just because you've got the money either.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we really want to touch on, is that as you go, it's important to save, but if you have a choice and you have extra income, extra money, and you can save it, save it. if it's better for you to spend it on something, or if there's something that it needs to go to, spend it without feeling guilty that you're not saving it, because that's where you kind of get into the hoarding aspect
Mm-hmm.
of, I'm saving it because I need it for later, but it would more likely benefit you now to go ahead and pay for whatever it is. So don't be saving to your detriment.
Yep.
Is one of the first things that I would say. But also at the same time, it's hard to save because we're not in a society that is geared to saving as much as it is to spending, and it's really a culture shift. And you talk about behavior management.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. That's just an odd term in and of itself. But I think that takes some time to develop too, and realizing that you need to do it.
Yeah. You mentioned just kind of, it's a society thing. And let's digest a little bit, because when I think of society's expectations, I think there's a couple different elements that make saving difficult for some people. Number one, we are kind of in this consumption mindset of either we want it now, so we're going to buy it. We think we need it, or we just haven't been taught how to be prudent with our money. So for a lot of people, it's an in and out transaction, right? They make the money, they go spend the money. And whether that is for necessities or for wants, this exchange, it's why a vast majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, because I don't care how much money you make. If you do not manage it, you will always live paycheck to paycheck, mm-hmm. because you are not being intentional with keeping some of that money and spending it in areas that are wise and prudent. Now, it's easier to do that with more money. Won't deny that for a second. But there's a reason that we are in this mantra of paycheck to paycheck mentality, because people don't know how to not spend money. It is that society driven expectation based upon consumption, based upon gratification, and based upon us not knowing how to do it any different, right? It's how our parents probably did it. It's how our friends do it. We get, we want, we spend. The other side of it, though, that I think can kind of come to light is this fear of, what if I don't have another chance? So even if we do see the value in saving, and I deal with this a lot with clients, there's this concept of, especially if they're coming from a scarcity mindset, the fact of not being able to buy something when they have the money is more frightening, mm-hmm. than having money and not being able to buy something when the time comes, right? They are more scared of the opportunity of acquisition than they are the potential risk of not having financial security. So I think there's two big elements to this that make it hard for us as a society to change, to adapt a new behavior, to embrace and to accept and to encourage a healthy savings habits. And I'm going to keep using that word healthy throughout this entire conversation, mm-hmm. because you can be toxic spender, you can be a toxic saver, and you can be a healthy spender and a healthy saver. We encourage the healthy elements. But yeah, we've got to get past those two initial roadblocks, I think, in terms of, why are you spending money from a society just mindset, and are you spending money for the wrong reasons? Even if it's a good purchase, are you spending it for the wrong reason?
Now, when you say healthy spender, that means I got it on sale, right? That's where you're going. I got it on sale, so it's healthy spending.
Healthy spending, you could go a couple different even angles on that. I mean, yes, if you buy it on sale, where my mind, and I know you're making a joking statement here, but for clarity's sake, just like healthy saving is saving with intention, healthy spending is spending with purpose and with thought process. Yeah. So making good buying decisions, making smart spending choices, doing things in a wise and prudent manner to get value out of that purchase is what I'm defining healthy spending as.
Yeah. And you said it to the point of healthy saving. you're not just putting money away. That money is serving a purpose, not in just being a source of funds if you have an emergency, but also it's actually gaining some interest for you. And like I said last time, we're in a society, or we're in an environment right now where interest rates are around 5% for a savings account.
Yeah.
That's not a 5% CD that locks your money away for 9 months, 12 months, 5 years. That is money that you could pull out of the bank tomorrow if you needed it. Healthy savings takes that money that's in the bank in a savings account and makes it work for you, because that's where you gain your wealth, is by letting the money do the work for you, versus you having to put in the time, the sweat equity. And you made the comment of, I'm going to spend, I'm going to work. It's in this society more than anything, it's I've already spent it. Now I'm going to work to pay off the bill.
Yes.
I owe, it's off to work I go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the mentality we've got to get away from. I've already spent it, from a paycheck to paycheck mentality, to I have money available to spend, and where am I allocating it, to I have money, I have allocated it, and I've put it in places that it's starting to work for me, rather than it's for expenditures and consumables. And let's not forget, right now we're in an environment, again, we've got 5% interest rates on savings accounts, but we're also paying a whole heck of a lot more for milk and eggs and butter
Yes.
and anything else. So our budgets for grocery shopping is ridiculous. Let's see, I don't know the last time I went out to eat, but it used to be I could account for about a $10 lunch, and now it's probably closer to $20.
Mm-hmm.
It's just ridiculous that it's great that I eat at home most of the time, or the fact that I don't have to leave the house most of the time. We are coming back up on the season where I'm spending more on lawnmower gasoline than I am the car. So I know you enjoy that comment.
I was just thinking more about how many pants do you still own?
Oh, too many, but hopefully they're going to fit better here in a few months. So, but yeah, it's just the whole idea of, we're in an environment where there's some positives, but there are also a lot of negatives, and it depends on which side of the coin you're on. If you don't have the money, life is a whole lot harder. If you've got money to excess, life isn't too bad, but there's still a little bit of a pinch.
Right. I think because, so, I mentioned the two kind of, I'll call them camps that people tend to find themselves in. I think it would, tell me which one you want to go out on, because for me, I'm kind of naturally thinking that we already, well, let's just do both of them. I'm thinking out loud here, and that's cool, and that's fine. Let's do both of them, because I think there's two different strategies based upon which camp you're in on the savings obstacles of, consumable society versus scarcity mindset. And especially since I honestly tend to deal with the second more with my clients, so I want to cover that a little bit more. But probably by and large, more people will struggle with the first than the second. Whenever you're looking at a consumable society, at a instant gratification, or just a lack of understanding of how to save versus spend, what are some of those initial strategies that let's say someone, they have a budget from the standpoint of, we try to manage our money, or maybe they don't have a budget at all because there's just not enough money to even mess with managing. If you're to walk up to someone and say, hey, here's the 3 things I would advise you to do to start being able to save money today, from someone that's in that first camp, what comes into mind initially for you?
Do it automatically. Put it away without even noticing it. The thing that I've hit on many times is the 10-10-80, where 10 goes to charity or a tithe, 10 is savings, and you live on the 80% that's the rest. It's a guideline. You start somewhere, but you have to start. If you don't start, you're never going to get anything accomplished. That goes back to the atomic habits that we talked about quite a bit a while back ago now.
Yeah.
But just the idea of getting started with something, 2%. I heard one the other day was, well, I'm going to start with 2% and then I'm going to go to 5%. And you know what? By the end of the year, I'll get to 10%. But it's just the idea that you have to start somewhere and you have to have some sort of mechanism to do that. We talked earlier about buckets. I would say if you have a paycheck coming in, whether it's paper or in most cases now it's direct deposit, set up a monthly amount or a bi-weekly amount of $10. To somebody, I would think in most cases that's not a whole lot, but from a percentage base, it should be pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not even looking at percentages yet. You're just looking at $10 because you want to get into the habit of saving it and not immediately going back and taking that $10 out of your savings because you just spent it. But the idea of starting somewhere, starting small, and starting the habit will get you to where you can eventually move more money into a savings area for you.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to take a slightly different approach on that concept because I like where you come from. But whenever I think of someone who is just starting out and doesn't have much savings, to me, they've got to get there fast if they don't want to wind up in the paycheck to paycheck mentality. So I really like your start small to build a habit essentially and to start flexing that muscle, to start getting used to it. I'm going to come at a little bit different angle though and say save as much as you can, as quick as you can, because that's going to allow you to see the results of that habit faster, get more motivation, get more encouragement, and people can choose whichever route that they want to go with. But as I'm thinking of someone who, let's say that they have $1,000 or don't have $1,000, whatever the case is, they are just starting the savings plan. That is your biggest buffer against emergency, against risk, against anything that could keep you in a paycheck to paycheck mentality. So if we're not saving, we got to start saving aggressively, in my opinion. And not to say that you're wrong in that thought process, because I think there's some people where that's the only way they can get started is with a small amount. I admit that. But I think for someone to really do well with this and to see that success happen, we've got to go at it hard and fast, you might say. Now, how do you do that if you've never started doing it? I love the automation piece because that's going to make it so stinking easy. I would also add that we do need to know how much we can save, right? If we say, okay, we're going to save $100 a month, but we only have 50 a month, that's going to make it even a worse situation. So let's figure out what our basic / minimal expenses are. Doesn't have to be fine-tuned down to the dollar amount, but let's get a really good idea of how much do we need to spend on a monthly basis for our essentials, for our living, to keep the lights on, food on the table, car moving, and kids' clothes type mentality. And then how much of that do we think we can draw out within a month's time and put as much of that into savings as possible? So that'll be, one kind of contrast that we have on this. The other suggestion that I would have is really think, why are you doing this? Because you're probably in a spot where savings is going to be hard. It's going to take a while to get that habit built up and to get that strategy going and everything. So if you don't have a why, and this goes back to our conversation last time, that's going to seem like a big mountain to climb. Mm-hmm. So let's make a bit of a dream goal. Okay, do we want to save that $1,000 so we can protect ourselves against the car repairs and against the medical bills and against whatever else is going to happen, because it's going to happen? Do we want to save up because we want to buy a house one day? Do we want to save up because we want to pay for a car in cash 5 years from now? Not right now, but later on. Do we want to save up because we just don't want to be in the hamster wheel that we're in right now. Without that plan in mind, no matter what Bob, you and I tell them, they ain't going to make it happen. So those would be my two initial strategies to get started with this. I love your automation. I would crank up as much as we can get into there, and I would do it with a goal and with an image, with a picture in mind to keep you motivated to go through that first hard phase.
Well, and from a coaching standpoint, you want that $1,000 in there for a couple of reasons. One is in some cases, it's a very hard goal to reach.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, it's not necessarily difficult, but it's going to change the way they think about money.
Yes.
And it guards against those emergency situations that always seem to show up. So I think we're coming at it at two different sides, but from the mere aspect of starting the habit, I would go with the automation. But to get the goal, you're wanting to hit that 1,000 first off.
Yeah.
And I'm not even looking at the 1,000. I'm just looking at the habit itself. So,
right.
And they come from different standpoints. Because if you're looking at somebody that's trying to get $1,000, the gazelle intensity type strategy is that you're not eating out, you aren't watching cable, and oh, by the way, all the streaming services now cost as much as cable now anyway. That didn't work very well.
No kidding.
But it's, in either case, you're having to reorient the way you do things. I would say gaining 1,000 is more extreme from the standpoint is, one, it's giving you a goal beyond just putting some money aside, but it's also serving a purpose of saying that you can do it. Here's why you're doing it. And once you reach that goal, you can reorient to a different aspect, or you can keep going. Either way, it still works. So,
yep. And the other piece of that, I think it's really important to keep in mind. Your approach to savings reflects your view of money.
Mm-hmm.
If you are saving from a avoidance standpoint, it's going to have a whole different feeling and thought process and motivation than if you're saving with I'll say accomplishing standpoint, right? If we are saving to avoid the pain, we're going to look at our budget, we're going to look at our money, we're going to look at our actions differently than if we're saving to accomplish the freedom that savings provides. And I think either one of those is a viable motivator, especially depending upon where you are with your money, where you want to go. But I want people to understand that those are two different perspectives and mindsets around money that are going to make you do different things. If you're in that avoidance, you may feel compelled to reduce as much expenses as possible to save up as much as you can as quick as possible. If you're in the accomplishing, Bob, they may do really well with your strategy of let's just do something. Let's have success with something in here. We don't know how much we can do, but let's do something and let's start getting that ball rolling. So, a very, very important element for folks to keep in mind. How are you thinking about this? How are you approaching this? Because each of those is going to give you a different perspective and a different tactic that's going to work for how you think, feel, act, respond, all of that to make this work.
And both sides have positives and negatives. The positive with the idea of you're getting that 1,000 in there. If you're dealing from an avoidance standpoint and you're saving as much as you can, and you don't have a $1,000 goal, you just have I need more mentality, you're never going to have enough set aside.
Yep.
Whereas on the other side of it, if you're going with my process of I'm putting something back, in most cases, and let's go bare minimum, you're putting $10 a month. You don't have $1,000 already sitting there. $10 a month, you've got $120, maybe $140 by the end of the year with a good interest rate.
Yeah.
But you don't have enough money to cover an emergency, and you never will if all you're saving is $10. Whereas the other side of the coin, if you're saving up for a huge amount of money because you're always avoiding something, you're probably going to have some health issues that go with that because of the stress of always having to save more.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And like everything, there's a balance that you have to find, and you have to be motivated, but you also have to be conscientious of your mental state, of your emotional state. Money will impact you as you are saving it, as you're spending it, as you're managing it. It will impact your emotions, your mental health, everything. So, yes, work with the coach to find the right way. That's really the best answer to this whole conversation. But, with all that said, I want to jump into the second camp that we were talking about, because I think this is, like I said, this is where I experience more work with clients. And I think this is honestly a harder sect to get around the savings aspects. Because typically, if someone is in a scarcity mindset, from the standpoint of if I have the money, I need to be able to get what I need because I don't know when the money will be there again. So to save and not spend, that in and of itself, it feels like a limitation, right? Their security is more in having control of what they need to acquire than having control of what they have in the bank. And that's a mindset function right there. I mean, if you don't believe that you are going to have the money in the future to buy what you need or want, then that's a mindset thing that honestly you can only overcome with a coach's help, because it's mental, it's emotional to a deeper level than what you and I, Bob, can talk about here, in 30 minutes time. But for those folks who are in that area, it starts with this understanding, I think, that what is money? How do you want to use money within your life? Because if your satisfaction and your contentment comes from knowing what you can get with money, then flipping that around, you say, okay, if I save, I will always have money to get what I need and what I want. Versus if I buy it now, is it going to last me? Is it going to stay with you? Am I going to buy it again? Am I going to be in this continual cycle? We said the hamster wheel in the first camp of the paycheck to paycheck mentality. Well, the hamster in the second camp is you're only spending, you're not saving, so you will never have the money that you want to have in those instances, because you're continually looking for, well, I need this and I want that, and where's the money going to come? And your scarcity revolves around what you're going to get, what the end result is, versus how can I protect myself from these other things, or these other potential emergencies or large purchases, whatever the case is down the line.
Spoiler alert, if you're living a life where you're going to always have to get something to replace something else, we now live in a society, it's called planned obsolescence. I can't remember, we talked about it the other day, but in essence, a cell phone is only good for 3 years. Anything that you have. Yeah. Well, we're not going to get into the risks involved in it not being supported by whoever the maker is, and the fact that they make it harder to get the batteries out of.
They only want you to have a phone for 3 years.
That's right. If you have it for 4, that's a whole nother ballgame. We're not even going to go into that world. And I keep phones as long as I possibly can. So we live in an age again where I just saw this earlier, a 2x4 from a house 100 years ago was 2 inches by 4 inches.
Yeah.
And the wood grain was nano bits apart from each other. Now a 2x4 is 1.5 by 3.5, and you might get 3 or 4 rings on that piece of wood. It's also the reason that things are so flammable anymore is because they go up in no time because they're not near as sturdy, aren't as sturdy. Pardon my poor grammar there. But if you want to get off the crazy train, you got to figure out and realize that it is a crazy train. And again, going back to your comment about coaching, you need to get your four walls. You need to get your gas. You need to get your food and water, your utilities, all the main things to keep a roof over your head. You got to get that part figured out. And then you figure out with what's left, what are you going to do with it? And, you know, there are so many different things that a coach can tell you on tips and tricks. And some of it is just, okay, I've got to do this differently. Others of it is a paradigm shift that if I'm used to doing this, but there is another option that is cheaper, just as worthwhile, isn't a brand name. There are things that you can do that allow you to spend $1.50 instead of $3, or $1.50 versus $2. And whatever that difference is can go to another expense, or you can start saving it. So that's where the coach comes in. And it's also just the other aspect is reading, learning, always learning something about how to use your money wisely.
Yeah. And Bob, I'm curious your thoughts. When
deep water.
Yeah,
You're getting in trouble.
It's a scary
here.
situation sometimes. Yeah. So looking at the overall mindset, because it honestly, there's probably more people in this world, or there's more couples, I feel like, that have, and just because this is a generalization, this is not a targeted comment, more couples will have a wife who considers scarcity from the standpoint of not having the money than there are couples who have a husband who is concerned with the scarcity of not being able to have the money for what they want to spend the money on. So there's that flip-flop of we want the money in the bank versus we want to get what the money gets us. Well, your money's going to get you something on either side, but do you want it to be emotional or tangible? And that's really where the distinction lies, I feel like, in this. Now, like I said, generalization, because that can very easily flip. It can be the woman wanting to buy stuff because she doesn't know if there's going to be money around to buy stuff. And it can be the husband going, I need to have money to save up for these big things that I want to do in life. It can go both ways. But generally speaking, the odds tend to lean in the first example. When you're in that spot of scarcity from what the tangible that money can get, the very first thing that I'm going to suggest that you do is get on a dad blame budget. Because if you're worried about having money to buy what you need to buy, it's because you're not managing the money that you have. And people that listen to this podcast know budget is the number one thing that we always go back to. But it is what controls your money versus your environment versus anything else. It allocates, it manages, it guides, it directs, it protects, does all these things if you do it. So I almost always see someone who is worried about not having money to get tangible or to spend on what they want to spend. It's because they're not managing what they have. And as soon as you can get a handle on what you have, you all of a sudden feel this confidence and comfort in, okay, I can afford to save money. I can afford to hang on to this money and wait to make that purchase because I know I'm going to have the money for that purchase at a later time. Again, it's like you said, a paradigm shift, but that's where I think the lacking begins on that is they're not managing what they have in the first place. And if you manage it, you will have it. Would you agree?
Well, I'm going to throw another paradigm shift at you and you're going, oh no. We've talked about budget for years. Budget. And you've got to have a budget. Something that dawned on me the other day is, and you talk about managing. If you don't know where you're spending your money, if you're not tracking what you're spending, a budget doesn't do you any good.
Amen.
if you have an idea in your head of what things cost, and utilities were $200 this month, and water was $50 this month, and I've got gas cost me $220. Okay, what did you actually spend on those things? Oh, well, I spent about $400 on utilities, and I spent maybe $300 on gas. And normally I'd go out to eat, but we started saving money and we eat at home now. So we're doing that according to budget. We're saving money by eating at home, and we figured that was going to cost about $250. Oh, you spent $600 at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Take a step back, track it first. I mean, that goes back to the whole buckets and saving.
Yep.
Do something. Start with tracking it before you get on the budget, because you can't make a workable budget unless you know what you're actually spending. So I know I devolved there, but just the whole idea of managing versus budgeting. If you don't manage and know what's coming in versus what's going out, budgets do you no good.
And Bob, we try to not judge clients. Well, I should say we don't judge clients. I never judge someone that comes to me with a financial problem under any circumstance. I'm a safe place. I'm here for accountability, for support, for open mind and ear, to guide you and encourage you and coach you. I am never going to judge you. But it amazes me how many people will come to me and say that they don't know how they're going to get out of debt, but they're spending $1,000 on eating out. They're spending $600 on groceries. They're spending $1,500 on rent or a mortgage. They're spending $500 on Amazon. All of these things that either they think is a necessity, they don't actually realize they're doing it that much, or they have just become used to, this is a lifestyle that I have. And I could think of one client in particular that after about a year of working with me, early on, they admitted that they were making the choice to allocate a substantial amount of money to eating out, the entertainment, beverage and food, because that was something that they enjoyed doing as a couple, and they built their lifestyle around that. I can support that if that's what we managed for, and they did. They were budgeting for that practice, for that tactic. After about a year's time, though, they made the decision to go, hey, it's actually more important to us to reduce our consumption and our spending on this, and instead turn that money into a debt and savings goal. They literally went from spending, I think it was like $1,200 a month in eating out and just, like I said, going out different places, to like $200 a month. So $1,000 that got converted into their debt payoff and their savings goals, and so much more. And they were so excited about that. But it's shocking to me how many people spend so much money in those areas and then wonder why they're not getting ahead, why they're not accomplishing their goals. It's because you're not taking care of what you got and put it in the right spot. And that's just being blunt and honest.
Well, and you mentioned the $1,500 mortgage, and we have to be respective of the people that are listening to this podcast. $1,500 in some places is not going to get you much of anything.
No.
$1,500 in other places will go a couple months. So I think it's, again, and you talk about not judging, having a roof over your head and how much that costs is very much geographically related.
Absolutely.
I can tell you where I am, for a college student, $1,500 will get you 2 bedrooms of an apartment.
Yeah,
that's not a 2-bedroom apartment.
It is unreal.
That is 2 bedrooms. You pay by the bedroom in these places, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
and I thanks for pointing that out, because the other part of that point that I'm trying to make there is that in most cases that is a necessary expense, and we can't control the cost of that. you can control the other three things that you're
Oh yeah.
spending just as much or half as much on. So I throw that in there to give light to, there are some expenses that are high that you're going to have to spend a lot of money on. There's other expenses that we can really tighten this up. We can have better management of this. So yeah, thank you for shining light on that separation. Anything else that you want to add to this second camp? Because I know we're going a little bit long on this part of this series. But anything else just from that scarcity of the money not being there that you think people can implement to begin switching that mindset and focusing more on the savings versus the spending?
Yeah, I'd say when you say scarcity, you also think of security
Mm-hmm.
and realizing how often it does come in. Depending on the job, it might not come as often, but usually if it doesn't come as often, there's usually more of it.
Yeah.
That's coming from a guy that gets a steady paycheck. But there's a way to budget for that. And going back to the coach standpoint, I think a lot of it is having somebody outside the immediacy of the situation that can say, oh, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or have you thought about this? It's not necessarily just taking the blinders off, but just getting another opinion. And we have a lot of people that money is not something you talk about.
Amen.
And so getting away from the stigma of it, but having somebody you can trust to say, will you help me with this? Or what am I missing? Just to get a different perspective on it that doesn't have that closeness to the situation. And that really helps, regardless of what your mindset is. But really, the whole scarcity mindset is a security thing, and it's not something that you can wake up tomorrow and go, I'm all good. It takes time, and it takes some working through, because it comes more than likely from a lifetime. And you're right, it could be the husband, it could be the wife. It all depends on where somebody came from and how they grew up and how money was treated before them. Mm-hmm. And having that conversation, if they're in a marriage, of how it affects them now. So yeah, for us to try to delve deep into this or not delve deep in this is not easy for us to do. And I know that this was going to be a short one, and I think we've done it justice by not leaving it at the surface, but at the same time putting some depth to it to say there's always going to be some more. And this is a topic I know we've talked on a few times already over 100%. The years. So.
And I think it's important to kind of leave this episode with the sentiment of, if anyone out there is listening who is naturally a spender and is reluctantly a saver, or who isn't concerned by their ratio of spending to saving, there's kind of this connotation that if you go work with a coach, they're going to tell you to tighten up the budget, to start saving as much money as you can, to get your debt paid off as fast as possible, and to not have a life. That's not the universal situation that we're going to put you into. And I had someone here a few weeks ago ask me, knowing that I am a big proponent and advocate of paying off debt early, of not having a mortgage longer than you have to, of avoiding debt as much as possible. And they were asking me, is that essentially what is kind of the protocol or the perspective that you take people through? Do you just always recommend they get their debt paid off, yada yada? And my answer was, depends upon what their goals are. As a coach, my job, and Bob, you could probably agree, I would imagine, job is not to put your financial situation into our personal bucket, what we would do, and then make that be the only option. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to take, what are your goals? What do you want to do? What is the budget that you want to implement? And then help you accomplish that. Now, I'm going to definitely suggest and recommend that we tighten up the budget, that we put money to savings, that we get our debt paid off, because that's the fastest way to financial success, security, and freedom. And that's how you can take control of your money, by managing it and keeping more of it. But I don't want people to feel like if they go work with someone, they're going to get told you have to do X, Y, and Z, even if you don't want to. That's not the case. I'm going to take what you want to accomplish, and I'm going to help you build a plan to accomplish it as fast as you can while feeling confident with the behaviors and the actions that you got to take, and provide recommendations on if there's something off on what your plan is, how can you adjust it and be comfortable with that to have success even faster.
Mm-hmm.
So don't feel like you're going to walk into a restrictive trap by working with a coach. You're going to walk into a situation that allows you and enables you to feel more confident, more comfortable, more in control, honestly, of your money and where you want to go and how fast you can get there.
Yeah. Every situation is different. Every situation has its own opportunities and setbacks. And you talk about judging. It's not judgment. It's, oh, we have a challenge. You have a challenge. I'm trying to help you overcome this challenge. And it's not necessarily as fast as somebody wants to do it. It's how fast they're comfortable with it, because seeing it on paper is one thing and living it is an absolute another. But even of that same vein, it's knowing where they are, where they want to go, and saying it has to come from somewhere. Absolutely. So you have to take it from where it is, where it's going, and reallocating it. And that's a lot of what coaching is having somebody come alongside you and go, okay, here's A, B, and C. You need to move it somehow. You need to make more of it, or you need to do something that changes the situation, but you have to have a why for why you're doing it. If you don't have the why, nothing's going to change. So it's got to come from somewhere. And why do you want to change? Two big pieces of it.
And honestly, the success has derived most from when I present a client with a suggestion, recommendation, encouragement, not a requirement under any circumstance. And then a few months later, they see why that's a good idea and they make the choice to implement it. I'm here to support you through your acceptance or your hesitation. I'm here to guide and encourage that. But 9.9 times out of 10, you're probably going to end up implementing what I recommend because you're going to see the value within that. So even if you don't agree with it at first, you're probably going to come around and see why it was a good idea in the end, and we'll have even more luck together.
I'm going to remain speechless on that one. So
Oh, Bob, yeah, this is going to be a short episode, and here we are 50 minutes in, but I think it has been very good, very strong, very palatable, and I'm really excited for the rest of this series as we dissect even more just elements of savings, and as always, hope that the savers are encouraged, that the spenders are challenged positively, and that above all, you feel enlightened and motivated and invited to work with a coach and to strengthen your ability to take complete control of your money. So that's why we're here.
You've learned from this episode that if you disagree with Austin, let him know and he will change your mind. So, and I always like to welcome that if we have anybody listening that doesn't agree, I'm not going to say we're 100% right, and the two of us don't agree on everything. They're different perspectives, and they're different ways to come to the same issue, and there's more than one way to solve the problem. So I always like hearing listener feedback to say, well, that's not going to work. And I know I've heard others that go, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. You can't do that. That can't happen. And, however they want to slice it. But thank you for listening. The two of you that are left after 50 minutes of us going on our short discussion. But just having that feedback from you all and what your opinions are, and being able to, in fact, have some topics come from listeners that say, I don't agree with you, or tell us more about something, that's always good to have. So again,
so Bob, what is your email if they have problems and negative reviews?
That is Austin at freedommoneycoach.com, and you just put Bob in the subject line, so he knows where to send it.
So I'll just forward it.
That's right.
Well, folks, as usual, thank you so much for tuning in, for being a part of the conversation. Hope that you were motivated, encouraged, inspired, and we look forward to having you come back next time for part 3 of our series on saving strategies. Bob, we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Hey, folks, if you found today's episode valuable and you want to learn how you can take the next step to gaining complete control of your money, I have a free resource called The 6 Secrets to Healthy Money Conversations with Your Spouse. This guide will help you learn how to better communicate with your spouse around finances so you can begin working as a team to gain complete control of your money. You can access it for free with your email at freedommoneycoach.com/moneyguide. That's freedommoneycoach.com/moneyguide.